guys, welcome back. So by now, we're all pretty aware that the Goodreads Choice Awards every year is based on a popularity contest. There's always more votes for the winner of each category than people who have shelved it read, which means people will vote for things because it's by their favorite author, it's got a cover they like, it's a movie, or just because one of their friends talked about it and their friend said it was good. Now, ideally, you would base the Goodreads Choice Awards on some sort of combination of how many people have read a book based off of the star rating that the book has on Goodreads, but that's no fun because you don't get to vote for anything. So I want to do a type of experiment this year and try to read the winner of each category and then compare it to the highest rated book in the top 10 of that category. I also went and took the ratings of those books at the time the Goodreads Choice Awards came out, so it might not now be the highest rated, but at the time it was the highest rated. Now, I'm going to go through each category. There's a few categories I'm not going to read. There's a few categories where it doesn't make sense for me to read the highest rated, and I will explain why in each section. But let's just go through this and see what I'm reading this year. We're going to start with fiction, and the winner of the fiction section is The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. Now, this is the long-awaited, or not really awaited because no one knew that it was coming, the follow-up to Handmaid's Tale. I don't know a whole lot more about it other than it's the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, and I haven't read The Handmaid's Tale since college. I had to read it for a feminism class in college. I plan to reread The Handmaid's Tale later this year, and then I will follow that up promptly with reading The Testaments. The highest rated book in the top 10 of the fiction section is a book called Olive Again. Olive Again is the second book in a series, and I don't want to read the first book in the series, so I'm going to skip down to the second highest rated book, which is A Woman Is No Man by, I'm gonna butcher her name, Etaf, E-T-A-F. I am so sorry for butchering that name. I have no idea how to pronounce it. This is an Arab American story of a woman who lives with her grandparents, and she's basically being forced into a arranged marriage that she has no interest in because her grandparents are very traditional. It sounds very interesting. It doesn't sound like anything I've ever read before, so I'm really excited to read this. The next Goodreads category is mystery and thriller, and the winner of that section is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelids. I probably mispronounced that too. Why are your names so hard today? But I've heard quite a bit about this. It is a woman kills her husband. She is sent to an insane asylum after killing her husband, and she's been in this insane asylum for a while now, and she hasn't spoken a word since she killed her husband. A psychologist is coming in to interview her, and this is the story, I assume, from the psychologist perspective. It sounds interesting. I understand the mystery would probably be like why she killed her husband. I've seen good and bad reviews from other booktubers on this. I'm not really sure what to think, but I'm kind of excited to read it. I don't read a whole lot of mystery thriller, and I'm looking forward to reading more in 2020. The highest rated book in the mystery and thriller category is The Lost Man by Jane Harper. I do know that it is a story taking place in the Australian outback, and it's three brothers, I believe, who all own land that attach or that touch each other, and two of the brothers find the third dead. It may not be brothers, it may be friends, but I know it's three men, and for some reason I have it in my head that it's brothers. I don't know much more about the book. I don't want to know a whole lot about mystery and thriller because I'm afraid that it's going to ruin it. I do know that Books and Lala read this and she hated it. So hopefully my taste in mystery thrillers is very different than hers and I really like the book. But I like Australia. I've got a lot of Australian friends. I'm looking forward to reading this one too. Next section is historical fiction, and the winner of that category is Daisy Jones and the Six. I'm honestly not interested at all in this book, but I'm going to read it anyway. It is a story of a band in, I believe, the late 60s, early 70s, and I'm not particularly fond of music from that genre or from that era, and I'm not particularly fond of just band stuff. I listen to music sometimes, but it's not like a priority in my life. I'm not fangirling about different bands. I don't go to concerts. It's just not an area of interest for me. But I have heard a lot about it this past year, so maybe I'll enjoy it anyway. We'll see. The highest rated book in this section is The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes. I have read her Me Before You, the first and second book. I didn't care for the series enough to continue past the second book. Those books are like just going out of their way to be depressing. This particular book sounds a lot more interesting, and I hope it's not sad. It's set in Depression era United States, and if you didn't know, the US government at the time kind of made up jobs so people could have money to buy food because there was just nothing. Everybody was poor. One of the jobs that Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady, kind of came up with was a traveling library, and she hired, not her directly, but the traveling library had women deliver books to each different section of as it's traveling along. And this is the story of 5 of the women who are taking part in this traveling library. I assume it's multiple different perspectives from each one of the women, and then like their life stories, what they're dealing with, different circumstances in this time period. It sounds amazing. I can't recall reading anything, or at least not a whole lot, about the Depression era, but I'm familiar with it from history courses. So very excited to read this. I already think I'm going to like it better just from the synopsis, but we'll see at the end of the year. The next category is fantasy. And if you don't know already, I've already read the top 10 fantasy books, so I can give you my opinion on these right now. I'm going to link that video in the cards. It should be over here. If not, you know where it is. You know where it is. I'll link that video if you're interested in hearing what I have to say about the top 10 fantasy nominations from 2019 Goodreads Choice Awards. But in case you don't know, the winner is Ninth House from Leigh Bardugo, and the highest rated is The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. I by far preferred The Winter of the Witch. Next category is romance. I typically tend to only read really trashy romances. I don't read a lot of contemporary romances, but it looks like that's gonna change this year. The winner of this category is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is a story where the son of a female president of the United States falls in love with a royal, like a British royal, who is also a man. So it is a gay romance, male to male gay romance. I've heard just everything about this. Like, this is BookTube's most obsessed about book of the year. I'm a little bit worried about it because of how overhyped I think it is, but I'm perfectly willing and perfectly ready to read it. The highest rated book in this category is a book called The Savior by J.R. Ward. This is the 17th book in this series. There is not a chance in hell I am reading 16 books to catch up to this one. The second highest rated is Red, White, and Royal Blue. So I'm going to read the third highest rated on this list, which is Verity by Colleen Hoover. Now, from my understanding of what I've seen other people talk about this is a mystery, like a suspenseful mystery, far more than it's a romance. But I believe there are romantic elements in it. From what I understand, a author named Verity is in a accident, maybe a car accident, and she cannot write anymore. She's a best-selling author, think Nora Roberts, and she can't write anymore. So the main character of this book is hired to be a ghostwriter for her while she recovers, and she's living with the family. The romance, I believe, comes in with her, the ghostwriter, and the husband of the author. And this woman, ghostwriter woman, finds a document that is really messed up, and it seems like some really shady shit has been happening with Verity and her family, creating the suspense mystery type thing. It sounds interesting, especially since it doesn't actually sound like a romance, and that's more up my alley than most typical romances, so I'm excited to read it. Next category is science fiction, and I'm gonna be straight up with you that I am not a fan of the typical space type of science fiction novels. My type of science fiction that I prefer is the dystopia, post-apocalyptic type of science fiction. So I may or may not like these books or not be excited about these books simply because of the subject base. I just know what I like in science fiction, and spaceships are not it. The winner of the science fiction category is Recursion by Blake Crouch. This actually sounds really, really interesting. The premise is a doctor slash scientist is trying to find a way to help cure Alzheimer's disease, and does this by taking memories from patients and uploading them into a computer. So as the Alzheimer's developed, then the memories can be reinserted and they can help retain their memories instead of losing them, because that's a horrible, horrible disease. Something happens, because something always happens, and everybody in the world somehow gets two different sets of memories. One of them that's their real life, and one of them that they feel like they've lived this entire life, but it's not their life. And this is kind of like the aftermath of that, and like investigating like what happened, how it happened, where these memories came from, that type of thing. It sounds really interesting. Very, very excited about this. Now, the highest rated book on this list is Tiamat's Wrath by James S.A. Corey. This is the 8th book in the series, so we're gonna skip to that one. The second highest rated is Dark Age by Pierce Brown, which is the 3rd book in the series, so I'm also going to skip this one, which brings us to Exhalation by Ted Chiang. I could be pronouncing his last name wrong. This is a short story collection, and I am here for the short story collection, so I'm very, very excited to read this one. Amazingly enough, I'm excited to read 2 science fiction novels, which has probably never happened in my entire life. Next category is horror. I like horror movies, but I don't really think I've read a lot of horror books. I guess I've read quite a few books in the horror genre, but none of them are actually scary, and they all get really shitty ratings from me. So the winner of this category is The Institute by Stephen King. I read the synopsis of this and it doesn't sound like horror. It sounds like this was voted because Stephen King writes horror novels, so everything by Stephen King has to be a horror novel, even if it's not. That's what happens when they put books into categories based off of how people shelf them, because a lot of people will shelf it as horror just because they see the name Stephen King. What this is about is, I'm gonna say, superheroes, where teenagers or children with superpowers, like mind reading, telekinesis type things, are kidnapped from their house and put into this institute. It looks like it's a government run organization and it's really shady as shit, and I'm getting the gist that this is going to be, they're turning these kids into assassins, like political assassins or political spies, but it doesn't really come out and state that. It sounds interesting. It doesn't sound like a horror novel. Now, the highest rated book is also The Institute by Stephen King, so I can't read the same book twice and compare it to itself. So we're gonna go with the second highest rated book, which is The Lost Causes of Bleak Creek by Rhett McLaughlin and Link Neal. Now, if you don't know, Rhett and Link are YouTube personalities. I don't watch their channel, but I have heard of them. This is kind of a Sleepy Little Town type of horror where there is a reform school in the town, and if you're a bad kid, you get sent to the reform school, and a lot of kids are dying at the reform school. So, you know, one of the narrating characters is going to get sent to the reform school, and then you got to figure out, like, what's actually happening, why are these kids dying, what's going on, that kind of thing. Sounds interesting, I'm here for it. Next category is humor. Not particularly my genre. I don't like reading things that tell me it's supposed to be funny. I like finding humor in things that aren't out to be humorous, but as with most of these categories, I'm willing to give it a try. The winner is Dear Girls, Intimate Tales, Untold Secrets, and Advice for Living Your Best Life by Ali Wong. I believe this is just a section of letters to her daughters. Ali Wong's a stand-up comedian. I'm sure it's going to be funny. I don't know much else about it other than that. The highest rated book in this category is Small Doses by Amanda Seales. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I probably butchered it. I also don't know who this person is, but she's another stand-up comedian, and this is another group of essays with like humorous life advice. So while I'm not really normally a fan of the humor category, I'm glad that both of the books in this category are very much on the same vein, because it would be a lot easier to choose which is better because they're the same type of book. Next category is nonfiction. The winner of the nonfiction category is Girls Stop Apologizing, a shame-free plan for embracing and achieving your goals. This sounds like a self-help book to me, targeted towards young women who need to build their confidence. I don't particularly fall into that category, but I would like to see what this author recommends. This is by Rachel Hollis. I would like to see what she recommends as far as how to build your confidence as a young woman. The highest rated book in this category actually sounds like an amazing book that I'm really, really interested to read. And at this point, I'm going to say that this one is going to be my winner for the category. This is Catch and Kill: Lies, Spies, and Conspiracy to Protect Predators. Ronan Farrow's a investigative reporter, and this is basically the story of all of those big important people in Hollywood that were sexually harassing and sexually assaulting up and coming starlets, and kind of like the expose on all of that. I didn't really follow along with any of that. The news depresses me. I try to avoid it as much as I possibly can, but I think this sounds really interesting. And if I had to pick a nonfiction book in this category, this is probably the one that I would pick. So again, excited to read it. Next category is memoir and autobiography. The winner is Over the Top: A Raw Journey to Self-Love by Jonathan Van Ness. If you do not know who Jonathan Van Ness is, why can't I talk today? If you don't know who Jonathan Van Ness is, he is one of the hosts of the new Queer Eye show. I've seen a couple episodes. All of them are fabulous. The show overall is fabulous. I'm very excited to read his autobiography. The highest rated book in this category is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is a autobiography from the young girl who was raped by Brock Turner, and it's basically the story of her experience having to deal with the media and just how awful it must be to be the victim in a high-profile rape case, and the fact that her rapist basically got off so easily because he was a rich white young man, and the judge was just disgustingly biased. So I'm excited to read this, but I have a feeling that this is not for everybody. Next category is history and biography, and the winner of that category is The Five: The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper. It kind of, in the title, tells you what it's about. It's about the women Jack the Ripper killed. It sounds interesting. This is by Haley Rubenhold. I like the Jack the Ripper story. I'm excited to read this one. The highest rated book in this category is also described by its title, The Only Plane in the Sky: An Oral History of 9/11. I was a senior in high school during the 9/11 attacks in 2001. This is going to be a very close to home and very depressing read, but I'm really interested to learn more about this, looking back on it almost 20 years later. The next category is science and technology, and I just have to say that I would read the winner of this category by its name alone. It just sounds so freaking amazing. It is Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Caitlin Doughty. This is basically a book from the perspective of a mortician who kind of tells you what happens after death as far as like physically happens to your body. There's no metaphysical, am I going to heaven, hell, what happens to my spirit when I die type of thing. This is just straight up like how your body decomposes and how like burials and stuff work. It sounds interesting. This is definitely something I would have never picked up on my own without hearing about it through the Goodreads Choice Awards, but I'm really, really interested in it now that I've heard about it. The highest rated in this category is Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. I'm gonna be straight up with you. I really don't want to read this book. I understand that there is a lot of bias towards women in society, but there's also bias towards men. There's bias towards sex. There's bias towards skin color. Everybody has some type of bias. Some people are more privileged than others, but there's always bias across the board. To me, while I understand there is a bias for women in a male-dominated world, books like this only focus on the bad things and they don't focus on the good bias. Like men, or let's make this good. Instead of the bad things that happen to men, the good thing that's happened to women. Women have a lower suicide rate than men. Women typically have an option for less dangerous and disgusting jobs than men. Women typically win custody of their children in a court of law. There are bad things about being a man, and I don't want to read a book about the horrible things about being a woman without celebrating the wonderful things about being a woman. So I don't know if this is actually true about this book. This is just what I typically see in books or articles of this type. So I am going to read this, but I feel like this is by far my most likely to DNF book this year. The next category is food and cookbooks, and I do not know how to just read a cookbook. Like, I don't cook. Your preference on cookbooks is gonna be what recipes sound good in the cookbook. So I'm skipping this category. We're not reading cookbooks. The next category is also a category that I have no desire to read, but I'm going to power through it for you, and honestly, I'm powering through it for me so I can get some new reading experience, and that is graphic novels and comics. I don't know why I don't like them. I've just never enjoyed reading a graphic novel or long format comic. Like the little comic strips, that's fine. Long format ones, not really my style. The winner is Pumpkinheads. It's basically the story of two kids who work together in a pumpkin patch every year during high school. I don't know anything past that. I've heard a lot of people on BookTube talk about it and say it's really good, but I have no desire to read this at all. Highest rated is a gay romance called Heartstoppers. It's male-to-male gay romance. Heartstoppers Volume 2. Because this is a graphic novel, I'm willing to read the first one and not just skip over, because I know graphic novels are short, easy reads. So I will be reading Heartstoppers Volume 1, Heartstoppers Volume 2. Am I interested? No. Will this probably be something I read in December because I'm putting it off all year? Yes. Am I really going to make my best effort to read it? Yes. Next category is the other category I hate. Poetry. And since I'm forcing myself to read graphic novels, I'm not gonna read poetry. I just can't do it. No poetry. I'll read poetry next year and leave off the graphic novels. I'm sorry if you're a huge poetry fan. Next category is debut novel, and lucky me, both of these are covered in other categories. So that's 2 less books that I have to read. The winner of the debut novel section is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. It's a male-on-male romance. We covered this earlier in the romance section. The highest rated is A Woman Is No Man by Itaf Rum. I'm still pronouncing her name wrong. This was from the fiction section, and it's the book about the Arab American woman whose grandparents are trying to arrange a marriage for her. Next category is young adult fiction. The winner of this category is 5 Feet Apart. I'm guessing this one because it's a movie. It's a movie about sick kids, but not like the we're going to die at the end of the book type sick kids. They both have some type of lung disease, which I can't remember the name of off the top of my head, and it's not in the synopsis. And each individual person with this lung disease has their own lung bacteria, which if they pass it on to somebody else with that lung disease, or if they risk passing it on and killing somebody else with that lung disease if they're within sneezing distance or coughing distance, which is 6 feet. So why the hell this is called 5 feet apart when you need to be 6 feet apart to not kill your friend? I don't know. I do know from the movie, but it's still dumb as shit. But it was a good movie. I'm totally down to read the book, and the book's always better, right? The highest rated of this section is a tie between 2 books, On the Come Up and The Fountains of Silence. Now, I'm tie-breaking it by what sounds better to me, and because I don't like music and I am not a black woman, I'm going to read Fountains of Silence, which is about the Spanish dictatorship in the 1950s in Spain. It sounds like a partial love story, partial political mystery. I don't know, it sounds good to me. I've got nothing else to say about this. Next category is young adult fantasy, and the winner is The Wicked King, which I've already read. It was my favorite out of the series, I'll give you that much. It's a series about a human girl who has been raised in fairyland, and she wants to be accepted in fairyland as a human instead of going back to the mortal realm. I did not like the series, but I really liked this particular book in the series. Now, the highest rated is also The Wicked King. The second highest rated is Queen of Air and Darkness, which is the 3rd book in a series, and it's a seriously, like, thick books in this series, and I don't particularly care about the Shadowhunter series from Cassandra Clare anymore, so I'm peacing out on this one. The 3rd highest rated is The Toll, which is from the Arc of Scythe series. It's the 3rd book in that series as well, but I've read the other 2 in the series, so that's the one I'm going to read. I really enjoyed this series so far. It is a utopian, which we really know is a dystopian future, where a computer kind of runs everyday human life. There's no death, there's no famine, everybody's perfectly happy, you don't have to work unless you want to. But to prevent overpopulation, there is a group of humans known as scythes who randomly choose people to kill permanently based off of their own internal laws and systems. They are not controlled and have no communication with the massive computer that controls everybody in this land, and it's a really interesting story. If you haven't read it yet, you really should. I'm very much looking forward to the conclusion of this series. The next category is middle grade and children's books. I am skipping on this category because the winner and then a bunch of the next ones in line, I think the winner and the second place are both middle of the series, and I don't want to catch up on the series. And then the highest rated for like 3 down are the middle of a series that I don't want to catch up on the series. So while I'm perfectly fine with normally reading middle grade books, just there's nothing on this list that like works until I get like way down on both sides. So I'm kind of like losing the whole purpose in both categories on this one. The final category is picture books. I don't know how the hell to rate a children's picture book. I'm skipping this category. They're all fantastic. Children are wonderful. I'm fine with reading them. I just have no way to compare them because I'm not a child. That is my list of everything I am reading from the 2019 Goodreads Choice Awards. You're not gonna see any updates on this video until December. I will kind of do a secret TBR type thing, like you'll hear that I am reading these books throughout the month in upcoming videos, but I'm not going to give you opinions on any of these until December, and then I'll come back and say, this is the 2 books that I read again, this is the one that I thought that I would like more, and then this is the one that I actually liked more. If you guys have any questions or have any suggestions on other books in these categories that I should read, please let me know in the comments, and I will see you Tuesday for the weekly vlog.